We could all use some good laughter, so,
Well, she's full of it this evening, that's for sure. It's awesome. It's good to see her in a good mood. All right, then. I'd like to call to order the November 17th, 2021 board meeting to order and remind everyone to please mute your audio when not speaking, as well as state your name prior to making a comment or motion and a second for any action item. Thank you. I'll begin by asking each commissioner to please respond with a here when I call out their name. Commissioner Bagnell,
I am here.
Commissioner Doan,
Here.
Commissioner Duggan,
here.
and Commissioner Schmidt.
Here.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to begin this evening by reports by our Chief Executive Officer and the management staff.
Thank you, President Sanders. That was almost a slip there. I'm not even sure the two names I was going to mix. I don't have a lot to report tonight. Just some Portland cryptosporidium results. For the month of October 2021, the Portland Water Bureau reported 1 cryptosporidiomosis detection in water samples collected from the Bull Run Headworks. Complete results of Portland's cryptosporidium monitoring are posted on the city's website. Next slide, if you could, Carrie. So that's the whopping CEO updates I had. So very short, and at this point, unless there's any questions for me from the commissioners, I'm going to turn this over to Joel Carey, our Water Resources Division Manager, and he's going to present the Safety Minute and Department Report this evening.
Hello, good evening, President Sanders, Commission members tonight. Thanks for having me here. We'll start with the safety moment for tonight. Figured it was appropriate to have a little wet weather preparedness moment in light of it being November right now, and I think the recent rains we've had. So a few tips for everybody to consider, just in order to be prepared as we enter the rainy season of Oregon. So you'll look on your left here. The first one is making sure that your gutters are cleaned as our trees lose our leaves, whether that's pine needles or leaves. This time of year, overflowing gutters can cause damage to your home if they're not properly cleaned out. Our safety and risk coordinator would be upset if I didn't remind you to do this safely. Please don't climb on your roof to do this and hang over the edge. Get a ladder and appropriately do it safely, or hire it out if you can. But just a good reminder to take care of that this time of year as our trees are finally losing all their leaves and needles. So. In the middle item here, another good reminder to take a moment if you can, just to make sure the catch basins are clean. As you're walking around the neighborhood, I think we've all seen the examples as these deluges come down and these catch basins get clogged with leaves, and unfortunately results in either localized flooding or safety hazards when you're out walking or even cars driving by. So a little proactive maintenance goes a long way in some of these areas, just to keep those periodically cleaned and raked out so that they can actually do their job. Last but not least, make sure you replace your windshield wiper blades when needed, or just a general reminder to do it annually if that's easier. This time of year in low light conditions and driving in heavy rain can be very difficult to see. I personally was reminded of this last Sunday. I was driving to Tacoma for a work event about 2 to 3 in the afternoon. Up I-5, it was about half the normal light because it was raining so hard, and the windshield wiper blades were going full steam. And I could definitely tell you it was good to have a decent set of wiper blades, because I could barely see as it was driving up I-5. So just a really good reminder this time of year to make sure those are in good working order. So. That concludes tonight's safety moment. Next slide, please. So our department report tonight is a topic that's been in the regional news lately. It is about Legionella. So we thought this would be a timely report, just to give a little bit of history, background, a little bit of update in relation to the district about our Legionella responses. And again, this is the Engineering Operations Department report and our Water Resource Division. For those on the call, just as a reminder about our group, we oversee our water quality program as well. So I know our group always has exciting topics in water quality. They're often sometimes scary, so pardon me for having that topic tonight, but we'll do our best to at least provide some useful information about strategies that we're doing. So Legionella, what is it and what does it cause? Well, again, here's the scary picture for tonight, what looks a lot like some hamburger. Sorry to ruin the appetite tonight, but that is Legionella bacterium, which causes Legionnaire's disease. The resulting symptoms of that are pneumonia, very serious type of pneumonia, which is a lung infection from the bacteria. A less serious infection that can be caused by Legionella is what's referred to as Pontiac fever, which causes more flu-like symptoms. So nothing that we want to obviously get, but that's the general outcome of getting infected and having Legionnaire's disease. So a little bit of history about Legionella. It was first discovered in 1976 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, during a hotel outbreak at an American Legion convention. So this is actually where Legionnaire's disease gets its name from, was because it was the American Legion convention. This Legionella bacteria are ubiquitous in the environment. They can be found everywhere, as we'll talk about in just a sec, including some treated drinking water supplies in very low concentrations, just given the nature of Legionella and how common they are to find. So, and crucially, they can grow at elevated temperatures. So they both survive and multiply in hot water heaters. That is the optimal range where you would find Legionella growing. That is why they can proliferate in those types of conditions. That is their preferred environment, that nice warm area where they like to actually grow and thrive. Next slide. So a little bit about drinking water treatment. It's just important to understand what it does and doesn't do. So in general terms, drinking water treatment microbiology, our goal is really to reduce fecal pathogens. It's a broad statement, but when we talk about that, we talk about things like E. coli, we talk about things like Cryptosporidium and Giardia. That's one of the main drivers for drinking water treatment technology. So problem microbes in buildings, for example, Legionella, they are different. They are not fecal in origin. They don't correlate with E. coli coliform testing in this that we do throughout the system because they occur naturally in the water, in the soil environment, and they don't rely on human or animal hosts to reproduce. They don't rely on a human intestinal tract or an animal intestinal tract to really reproduce. So that is why, again, they are ubiquitous in the environment and they can survive certain drinking water treatment processes and multiply in biofilms. The kind of the key takeaway, it's a different set of microbes altogether when we talk about premise plumbing. When we talk about why Legionella is a risk, it's kind of similar, but these are some really big differences that we'll talk about here in a sec. So next slide. So issues that make building premise plumbing unique. There's a variety of concerns which differentiates why this is a risk for buildings and other types of plumbing. So some examples that we'll talk about here just for a second. Some of the key drivers would be the high surface area to volume ratio. The size of that pipe and the amount of water plays a big factor in the ability for Legionella to actually grow and proliferate and get a hold on something like a biofilm. Temperatures, like we talked about, a great example is obviously we have a system that's underground. We have storage tanks full of large water. You get into a building or other types of premise with significant amount of plumbing, elevated, then that temperature comes into play and can be a driving factor, as we just talked about what Legionella likes to grow in. Some other really notable things, the type of material, low to possibly no disinfectant residual. Once we provide that water to our customers, it can travel through a significant amount of piping and lose its residual because of temperature, water age stagnation, again, those things that cause biofilm where Legionella can actually get a hold. And as noted on here on the slide, aerosol exposure is a really key element. That's a huge difference, obviously, when we talk about this, why this type of exposure can be problematic in buildings, because once you get into things like showering or using water in other ways, that's where the real exposure and risk comes from. So next slide, please. So who is primarily at risk? About a quarter of the cases don't have common risk factors, but we do know that some of the most likely risk factors that are associated with Legionella are older adults over 40. Those individuals who are considered smokers, obviously because of Legionella being a lung infection, and then the immunocompromised. These things together really kind of point out why places like hospitals, assisted living facilities, in some ways can be some of the more at-risk facilities. And we'll touch on that in the end of our slide deck here tonight too. So next slide. So where does Legionella grow? Well, we just talked about these risk factors. We just talked about, some of the things that really lead to Legionella getting a hold in a certain type of, under certain types of conditions. So some of those more specifically are hot water tanks, boilers, and associated plumbing, shower heads. These are things that you typically don't run a lot of cold water through. They're always warm. Majority of the time, again, they're coming from whether it's in a home setting, which isn't the high risk point, but a commercial setting. They're coming from boiler. They're always used for hot water, so that's where some of that exposure can come from. Commercial cooling towers are another source of transmission. There are a lot of Legionella control strategies in place and industry guidance for commercial cooling towers because of the nature of those towers. Circulating water through those, it gets warm, it's elevated. That can be a significant risk point for those. Spas and swimming pools. You'll note that picture up there is on a cruise ship. Cruise ship's another great example. Not only spas on cruise ships, but just the cruise ship in and of itself. Just because if you think about it, it's actually a large floating building with its, without a permanent service connection. It is right for that type of condition. And then another example would be fountains and similar type water features. As you'll see in that picture there in the bottom right-hand corner, aerosolized water coming out of a fountain. If it's not properly maintained, that can be another risk factor for Legionella exposure. Next slide. So transmission, critical part about this. Transmission is not through consumption of water. Transmission is through inhalation and aspiration. So obviously we know what inhalation is, right? That could be the shower example we talked about, just generally inhaling those bacterium as you're breathing in, being aerosolized. Less common, still a risk factor would be aspiration, as we call it, going down the wrong pipe. We've all been there when you choke profusely, swallowing something wrong. Same concept that coughing, that type of choking can cause that bacteria being aerosolized to go into the lungs. So two common types of transmission there, one on the left being most common. And again, just to reiterate, it is not through consumption of water, through just typical ingestion. So next slide. So what can TVWD do in these situations? Well, the good news is over the last several years, we have taken some steps on our end to try and help minimize Legionella risk for our customers. Well, what are some of those steps? It's sharing our water quality expertise. Plumbing is different than a distribution system, but they are similar. This is where our expertise comes into play, our water quality understanding and knowing our large at-risk customers. So some of the things our staff have actually done over the last few years, we have coordinated with some of our largest industrial customers, both from the medical care providers to just large buildings. In general, we've actually gone through with those customers, helped walk them through their testing plans. What types of chemistry should they be understanding about the testing? What do those results mean? So we've been actually doing that over the last few years to try and help them just really refine their plans and sharing that expertise that we have on our end with the water quality chemistry and what does it actually mean. So that's something we started several years ago with some of our customers in light of guidance that came down for large hospitals as well, that they had to have a Legionella control plan in place, both from the CDC and from the Center for Medicare. So part of that is also providing outreach and education on water quality and maintenance. That kind of key point is, even though we provide water to the customer and that the ownership of those assets ends at the meter, it doesn't mean our relationship needs to end. One thing you'll note there in that slide, we've actually had this information on our website since the beginning of COVID due to large building shutdowns. really trying to make sure we provide that type of guidance. What's the industry recommendation for your hot water tank setting? What about Legionella exposure, the things we just talked about tonight, and a variety of resources that those folks can use about control plans in their buildings. What does that monitoring look like? And again, just contact us. If you have questions, here's our area of expertise that we can help you understand the water quality you're seeing, translating those results, making sure you have the right results and things are accurate so you really know what's going on inside your building. So, and last but not least, on our end, maintaining our system chlorine residuals. So that's a really important step that we take. It's proactive and reactive things like UDF, unidirectional flushing. You've heard about this in the past, our water quality optimization task force, trying to make sure that we are doing our best across our system and in all areas to provide the most consistent chlorine residual at our customers' point of entry, at their meters for some of these customers, and just across the system in general, to make sure we're doing our part to provide them the best possible chance at mitigating that inside their building. So these are some of the steps we're taking. We're continuing to do this work in light of what's been happening recently in the area. And with that, that concludes my presentation tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
No. Any questions or comments from the commissioners for Joel?
This is Jim Doan. I've learned more about Legionella tonight than I have experienced in my whole life. Thank you very much, Joel, for making it clear to me about how nasty this stuff can be.
Yes, you're welcome, Commissioner Doan. Yep. And if any questions come up from your interaction with the customers, please feel free to guide them to our website, guide them to our staff. We are happy to talk and walk through this whole entire process with them.
Excellent. And I know personally that is just one more reason to use as to why I will never go on a cruise ship. All right. Thank you, Joel. If that's the last report from our management staff, our next item this evening will be our commissioner communications and reports of meetings attended. And we'll begin with Commissioner Bagnell, please.
I know. When your name is right at the front of the alphabet, there you go. So meetings attended for me, I had several this month. On the 25th of October, I attended the Westside Economic Alliance Conference where Representative Kurt Schrader, gave us a congressional update. And then on the 27th of October, I had a meeting with our consultant, Judy Clark, to talk about the CEO evaluation process for this year. On the 2nd of November, it was the board work session where, of course, we had an update from Dave Kraska on the Willamette Water Supply project. And then we also had an update from staff on COVID and what's going on with staff testing and staff re-entering the workforce. On the 8th of November, I attended a meeting with Commissioner Schmidt, with our CEO, and with legal counsel to discuss the Joint Water Commission chlorine contract issues. And then on the 17th, that would be tonight, the regular board meeting with district business. So that's all of my meetings.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Bagnell. Commissioner Doan.
Yes, on the 25th of October, I attended the WIF meeting, Willamette Intake Facilities. My hope is that Dave is going to show us slides, the same slides he showed us, because it's quite spectacular. I attended 2 sessions of Talking Water, one on the 26th and one on the 28th. I had the work session on November 2nd. I met with Judy Clark on the CEO evaluation on November 3rd, and then tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Doan. Next, Commissioner Duggan.
There we go. On the 26th, I attended the Talking Water virtual open house where they talked about the future of water in Washington County. On the 2nd, I attended our board work session. We got Willamette water supply system and COVID vaccination update. On the 4th of November, I attended the regular monthly meeting and executive session for the Willamette water supply system. On the 9th, I attended our board agenda planning meeting that I have with President Saunders and CEO Hickman. On the 11th, I had my meeting with Judy Clark, as described by others, for the CEO evaluation session, and then tonight's meeting. So that's it for month of November.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Duggan. Commissioner Schmidt.
Yes, on the 2nd, I also attended the work session. We talked about Legionnaires and Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue vote. On the 2nd, I met with Judy for the CEO evaluation. And then on the 2nd also, we had a work session. Well, that's already been covered. On the 8th, I had a meeting with Tom Clark and Bernice, speaking about the chlorine issue nationwide. Something's got to happen there anyway. Also on the 8th, I had a meeting with JWC Executive Committee, talked about chlorine prices that are going up, what goes down ever, and then tonight's board meeting. And that would be all.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. And for myself, let me get my meetings up. Many of these are repeated. The 26th and the 28th were the Talking Water presentations. And I'll just take a moment to praise the organization for especially the winter irrigation system preparation Talking Water event. In my opinion, that was very well attended. I think there were over 40 people there. And the folks, the citizens, our customers that came were asking very pertinent and relevant and important to them questions about their home irrigation system. And so I thought that really demonstrated the team's recognition of the needs of our customers. And so I wanted to take a second to acknowledge how valuable that presentation was, I think, to our customers. On the 1st, I met with Tom to, again, learn some more about our organizational structure. And then on the 2nd, while I didn't make our board meeting because I had another event for one of our children, in the morning, I attended the SDAO virtual presentation on homelessness on public properties. So there was a long discussion on what the legal aspects were of that relative to some of the bills that were coming to the Oregon legislature. And then on the 2nd, I also met with Judy Clark as well. She seemed to have been very busy that day. On the 8th, I again met with Tom to talk about the way that TVWD works with our partners. And then on the 9th, along with Vice President Commissioner Duggan and Tom, we set the meeting agenda for tonight's. And then tonight's monthly board meeting, where we'll be talking about updating some of our rules and regulations and getting information on a collections update as well. All right. Very good. So with that being taken care of, the next item is then topics to be raised by commissioners. And I will put forth then the question to the commissioners, to the board members. Do any of us have topics that are to be raised by the commissioners this evening? The requisite 8 seconds has passed. So we can now move to our next item, and that is public comment. So public comment time is set aside for persons wishing to address the board on items on the consent agenda and matters not on the agenda. Additional public comment will be invited on agenda items that as they are presented. Do we have any persons this evening who would like to comment? Okay. Not hearing anything. I'm going to move on to the next business item, which is our consent agenda this evening. And the consent agenda items are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any board members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Any items requested to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion will be considered immediately after the board has approved those items which do not require discussion. This evening, we will be approving the October 20th, 2021 regular meeting minutes and approving the November 2nd, 2021 work session minutes. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented?
This is
This is
Commissioner
Dick.
Bagnall, so moved.
This is Dick, second.
Thank you. At this time, then, I would like to ask our district recorder to provide the roll call.
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. The motion now passes. Our next item is the business agenda, where we will consider approving a motion to read by title only the draft ordinance amending and restating rules and regulations to provide for civil penalties for unauthorized work upon or tampering with the district's water system and direct that the ordinance be brought back for a second reading and adoption on the December 15th, 2021 board meeting. We'll take a staff report from Clark Belfour.
Thank you, President Sanders and commissioners. Good evening. So this is something that has been the subject of a couple of presentations to you prior, one in the work session in October, early October, and then at the regular meeting. And here's a slide. We have a very short slide deck, so we'll hopefully get through. I don't have really cool pictures like Dave Kraska would have with the program, so I apologize. But so yes, we had an informational presentation again at the regular meeting on October 20th. And just to reiterate what's in the staff report and as well as the attachments, our rules and regulations are our ordinance. It's our ordinance that we have adopted at various times for as long as I've been here and prior to that. And from time to time, we review and amend. But these rules and regulations, this ordinance is what determines how and when and the terms and conditions of use of the district's water system and how we provide water service to our customers. One of the key elements that we've always had is that there will be no unauthorized work or tampering with the district's water system. This usually comes about in the case of individual customers tampering with their meter, piping around it, those sorts of things. But we do encounter, and we have encountered it with a little bit more frequency, the situation where contractors working on private developments or other developments that need to connect to our system or somehow do something that impacts our system will go and just do the work without calling us, without having us supervise, without getting authorization. And that, so far, we have not had any problems with that. Problems in the sense of people being out of water, people being in dire circumstances, but it does have the potential for that. And so in speaking with staff and as you've seen in the informational presentations, we think that it's appropriate to recommend to you that you amend the rules and regulations to specify an assessment of civil penalties, monetary penalties primarily, but also including prohibition on doing work within the district system at all for contractors and others who don't get authority in advance, don't go through our inspection process, don't go through our review and supervision. And so that's what the ordinance amendment will do. Next month, when we come back with the second reading of the ordinance, we also will bring to you the resolution that you adopt every year. And the resolution that you adopt every year for rates, fees, and charges will have a new Exhibit C. And that Exhibit C will specify what the civil penalty is. So next month, we'll be looking at two actions, really. So what have we done? We've moved all the penalties. We also have some other fines and penalties in our rules. We're now moving those from other parts of the rate resolution. They're going to be in this Exhibit C, and that will deal with illegal use of the water, illegal use of fire lines, and also fire hydrants, which is also another situation we have often with contractors. And then we're adding the new system tampering penalties to the exhibit for unauthorized alteration or manipulation. And these penalties are going to escalate based upon the severity of the event and the frequency of the event or the history of this person if they have done it in the past. So we can roll to the next slide. So once again, this is what I talked to you about a little bit earlier, but we'll dive into a little bit deeper. By ordinance, we will adopt these amended rules and regulations prohibiting unauthorized work and tampering with our system. We'll have the civil penalties in place. We will include these going forward with the biennium rate setting process. And this will be effective January 15th of 2022, assuming that you take the action during the December meeting. Thank you. Can we roll to the next? So to restate what's in the staff report, we would like you to consider a motion to read by title only the draft ordinance amending and restating the rules and regulations regarding these civil penalties, and direct then that this ordinance be brought back to you for second reading and adoption at the December 15th meeting. And I think with that, I don't think I have any more slides. So we are good to go. I'm free to answer any questions that you may have.
This is Commissioner Bagnall. I think this is a critically important public health issue, and I am glad to see that the district is taking proactive measures to make sure these things don't happen. And given that, I would like to move that we read by title only the draft ordinance amending and restating rules and regulations.
This is Jim Doan. I'll second.
Great. All right. Thank you. District Recorder, could you please provide the roll call vote?
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. The motion passes. Okay, the next item up is our informational presentation, where we will have an informational presentation on the collection update, and this will be provided by our staff report from our customer services manager, Andrew Carlstrom. And whoever's running the slide deck, man, you just are on it today. I don't know who's doing this, but wow. Perfect speed. Andrew, would you like to take over?
Yeah. Good evening, President Sanders and Board of Commissioners and members of the public. Yeah, tonight's brief presentation is going to be on our collections efforts. And where we're going to start tonight is just an overview of TVWD's collections efforts during the COVID pandemic, starting with the fact that TVWD's customer arrearage balances accumulated to historic levels during the pandemic. As you know, the district took steps to support customers and address these arrearages starting last year and continuing into this year. The number of customers that are actually in shut-off status now is close to the same level as when the pandemic began. And later I'm going to go over what we're calling the heat map. I believe you've seen before, showing improvements especially over the last year. I wanted to note, though, that TVWD is evaluating the collections efforts and making adjustments to it. And this is to really address customer feedback as well as improve the customer experience. And CEO Tom Hickman has directed for greater flexibility for frontline staff to work with customers as well as to minimize shutoffs. A quick note about federally funded assistance. On this slide, we've got three assistance streams. The Oregon Emergency Rental Assistance Program is currently in effect. They're accepting applications until December 1. This is right now, there's a backlog of unprocessed applications, which total more than $300 million. There's going to be a 6-week pause for accepting those applications starting again December 1st. And this is going to allow state and local agencies to assess the remaining funding from the $280 million that was allocated for all of Oregon. The second assistance stream I wanted to highlight here is one-time assistance using ARPA funds. ARPA is American Rescue Plan Act. The ARPA funds are intended to be applied in areas of concentrated need. At this time, there's no time estimate when this will be available, but the county, Washington County, is working to identify census tracts with concentrated need. $2 million is allocated for all public water utilities within Washington County. And then the final assistance stream we wanted to highlight here is what's called LIWA. That's the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. There is going to be about $902,000 for all of Washington County. The next step for LIWA is for the state agency to get final contract signatures, and Community Action is going to be taking applications, and they anticipate that funding will be available sometime within the next couple of months. So some of these are going to be out quite a ways. The last thing I want to identify on this slide was, as I identified the last time I was in front of you, was the CIS implementation. And TVWD and Clean Water Services are going to need to take a very deliberate approach for how to address collections for the upcoming cutover and stabilization of the new CIS. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
I think this is the next slide, or did you want to?
It did.
Yeah.
It advanced.
Okay. Thanks, Carrie. It was a delay on my side. Wanted to continue talking about efforts during the pandemic and with more of a timeline. And so starting in March 2020, TVWD, as you know, discontinued water shutoffs due to the pandemic and needs for the public health crisis. In August through December last year, TVWD conducted extensive outreach for 2020 CARES Act Utility Assistance Program funds. And then fast forwarding to this year, in April, the district assembled an internal collections group to address how to approach these arrearages. In July, the district resumed shutoffs for customers who meant the following: were more than 120 days past due, did not communicate with the district, and did not enter into a long-term payment arrangement. At that time, dispatch fees were waived, and the district also provided an enhanced customer emergency assistance, limited duration of $350, a maximum for residential customer. In September, the district resumed shutoffs for the same conditions as July, plus adding if payment arrangement was broken. And at that time, TVWD resumed normal collections processes for customers who unfortunately didn't meet the payment arrangements. And at that time, in September, TVWD also began charging the dispatch fees. In October, TVWD returned to the third-party income verification for the CEAP Customer Emergency Assistance Program, and the maximum assistance that was set was for the fixed charges plus 28 CCF. And then in November, wanted to highlight that we're evaluating collections efforts and potential changes that we can make for the benefit of customers. Looking at the water accounts receivable, the AR balance and shutoff, we've got on this slide, the purple is 2020 and the green is 2021. Wanted to note here there's been a significant drop in the amount owed between July 1 and September. So looking at the end of June, we had 902,000, and then looking at the end of September, 461,000. Next slide, please. And on this chart, we're looking at the number of water customers and shutoff. Again, the darker bars are 2020 and the lighter blue bars are 2021. We did have a significant drop in the number of customers in shutoff status from the peak of COVID-19, which was really November 2020 compared to now. We do have more customers now in shutoff status when compared to pre-pandemic times. Next slide, please. And this is the heat map slide. So I know you've seen the heat map before, but this gives you more of a time lapse. And this is these maps again show the density of customers, water customers at risk for shutoff. And this is over about a year, October 2020, then June of this year, then November of this year. And looking at the shading, the darker shading, the purple and the magenta, this is higher density of customers at risk, and then the yellow is lower density. So you can see that these pockets are not evenly distributed throughout the district. We definitely saw over the past year a reduction in this density across the district, but especially in those areas of greatest impact. And looking at the customer emergency assistance, this is TVWD's program for the first 4 months of the fiscal year.
Hey, Andrew, I'm sorry
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Please.
but Commissioner Duggan has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Duggan.
Not to interrupt because I could have waited till the end, but the heat map that you had up previously, I was looking at the progress over time, and it looked like all the areas were kind of decreasing in intensity, except for there was one that increased in intensity, and it's a very localized area right at the intersection of Walker and Highway 217, the interchange there. And it seemed to develop between October 2020 and June and then into November. From what I know of that area, we only have about 6 or 7, maybe less than a dozen customers in that area. Is there an explanation, or is it just we have some customers there that are having problems? I just was curious because it kind of stood out as the only area that didn't get better and instead got worse over time.
Yeah, great question, Commissioner. I don't know the answer. We can get back to you and report back at the next meeting, but you're correct at that one intersection. It did develop in at least the last 2 of the heat maps, and there are pockets north of Highway 26 that increased as well. But yeah, we can get an answer for you and the rest of the board.
Yes, I forgot about those 2 up north of 26. It just seemed like over time that things got worse for those one, and it's probably just a case of individual things. That I just was wondering if there's any trend there or any other explanation other than just individual circumstances. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. So getting back to our emergency customer assistance, the TVWD program for the first 4 months of the current fiscal year 2021 to 2022, starting out July at 231 and ending up in October at 14, July being about 69,000 and then 3,900 in October. So that just gives you a sense of where it is right now. And then the last slide I have here is addressing the collections issues and some things that we wanted to acknowledge and tell you the things that we're examining right now. So first, we want to acknowledge that there have been long call wait times, and we have been understaffed in customer service and billing. We've had retirements and other turnover. The good news is we do have new staff that are hired and are being trained, and when they're up to speed, we'll have much greater capacity to support customers. But we want to acknowledge that there have been long call times and long wait times. The calls in which we're handling payment arrangements have taken much longer, but there's also been a staff capacity issue. We're also looking at assessing the phone system to see if there are more efficiencies that we can make for a better experience. And I do also want to acknowledge that on the call times, we're looking at what data we can report to you on a regular basis. We want to make sure we're getting the right metrics that are consistent with what's being provided in the utility industry, but we wanted to give you a greater sense of that on a regular basis for you and the public. Escalations, we had an increase of escalations during COVID, or at least until we resumed shutoffs of fee waivers and the new payment arrangements. And this is calls escalating to a lead or supervisor. And again, at the direction of CEO Tom Hickman, we're empowering frontline staff with greater flexibility in their work with customers in order to minimize shutoff. And we can do this by increasing first call resolution. So we're empowering those new staff. We're also going to be addressing whether we suspend dispatch fees beginning in December. And then looking at our long-term payment arrangements, right now there are about 500 customers that are past due and below that 120 plus day age threshold. We're assessing whether to expand collections under that threshold. To date, it's been mostly over that threshold, but we're taking a look at where we should move our efforts. Looking at the holiday season, there will be no shutoffs for Thanksgiving week, for next week, and also the last 2 weeks of December for the benefit of customers. And we're also looking at arrearage options. Are there third-party providers that can help manage these payment arrearages? And then the last item I did want to highlight again is CIS go live and stabilization. We have a lot of moving parts right now between collections and CIS and the pandemic, but the best practice that we've learned from the industry for these implementations is when you get to cutover is to either sharply truncate or suspend your collections and shutoff efforts. And after you climb out of the hyper customer care period after the cutover, you start resuming shutoffs. So we just need to be very deliberate about how we're doing that and how we're communicating to customers. But the take-home message for this slide would be that we are listening to the feedback and we're making changes for the benefit of customers and for the community. And at this time, I'll be happy to take any questions that you would have. And
this is Commissioner Bagnall. I would just like to, I guess, give a shout out to Andrew and the team. I think, especially considering everything we've been through with the COVID restrictions and the changes in the work environment, to continue making the progress that you have made with the new customer information system is pretty amazing. And I'm impressed that it's going forward at the pace that it is going. And I look forward to seeing the new improvements with the new system. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Duggan. I just wanted to thank the customer service staff for really a difficult 2 years, and especially in the last 6 months, having to deal with this continuing situation and having to adjust to a lot of things that were beyond their control. I think it's unfortunate that we've had to shut off so many people after we had decided to suspend our COVID suspension. But I think it's great that we will be looking at, or that we are planning on not shutting off customers during Thanksgiving week or during the holiday weeks at the end of December. I think that's something good for both staff and for our customers that would find themselves in this shut-off situation. We can deal with the business end of things outside of those periods that are high stress for a lot of folks, for a lot of reasons, even without COVID. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all the staff time that has gone in to this, and I know that you're continually trying to figure out how to do things better, and I applaud staff for doing that. So thank you.
Great. And Andrew, I would just like to second that emotion. I think Commissioner Duggan said it very well. It can't be easy to be the front line of customer service right now, and their work. Please, from the board, thank your team for us. All right. That being the end of look at that. Carrie is just on it. She's got it going tonight. All right. With that, then, that'll be the end of our evening. Before we go, I'd like to personally wish everybody happy Thanksgiving, to all the board members and everybody in the TVWD organization. I'm going to adjourn and then ask a question. So there being no further business.